My name is Claire, and I was 34 years old when I checked my phone at 6:12 on a Tuesday morning and watched my savings account empty itself in real time. Not all at once, that would have been easier to explain. It happened in 4 transfers over 11 minutes, each one just under the threshold that triggers an automatic bank alert. $4,800, then $4,800 again, then $4,750, then $4,600. Someone had studied the system carefully. Someone had taken their time. The total was $18,950. The account had held $19,200. They left $250, which I later understood was not an oversight. It was a message. They wanted me to see the shape of what had been done to me and still not be able to prove it easily. I was a forensic accountant. I had spent 11 years finding exactly this kind of pattern in other people's books, and what I did after that, none of them saw coming. Welcome back to Hidden Truth Stories, where we sit with the quiet women who finally stopped explaining themselves and let the truth do the talking. This channel exists for the women who kept the receipts while everyone else kept the peace. We would love to know where you are listening from. Drop your city in the comments because this story is going to travel. Subscribe if you have not yet so the next one finds you. Now, let me go back to the beginning because this did not start that Tuesday morning. This started almost 9 years before, in a house that smelled like mothballs and fried onions and my mother's specific brand of quiet disappointment. The house I grew up in was a 3-bedroom ranch in a mid-sized Ohio city where everybody's father worked at either the plant or the county. Our street had 4 identical oak trees spaced evenly between the sidewalk cracks, and in the fall the leaves collected in the gutters and my father never cleaned them out, and my mother never stopped mentioning it. The kitchen had yellow linoleum that had been yellow since 1987 and a window above the sink that faced the Hendersons' chain-link fence. I know that window well because I spent approximately 4 years of my childhood standing at that sink doing dishes while my brother Marcus watched television in the next room. Not because it was my job, because no one ever told Marcus it was his too, and I had learned by the time I was 10 that asking directly produced a conversation I did not have the energy for. I started keeping lists when I was 12, grocery lists, homework lists, lists of things I needed to do before Monday. My mother called it a quirk. My 7th grade teacher called it a gift. I called it the only way to make sure nothing fell through the cracks, because in our house, things fell through cracks constantly, and it was always somehow my fault when they did. I became a forensic accountant. I was good at it, and because the job required the same skills I had been practicing my whole life, reading what the numbers actually said instead of what someone wanted them to say. I worked for a mid-sized firm, and I had a reputation for being the person you called when something did not add up. My supervisor, Donna, liked to say I could find a discrepancy in a document the way other people found a gray hair, not looking for it, just noticing. I took that as a compliment. It was meant as one. I had a yellow legal pad on the corner of my desk that I used for handwritten notes when I was working through a complex file. Not because the computer was not sufficient, because writing by hand slowed me down enough to catch things I might otherwise skim. Every morning I made coffee, set it beside the legal pad, and let the first sip cool while I reviewed whatever I had left off the night before. My coffee was always cold by the time I drank it. I did not mind. My brother-in-law, Derek Marsh, entered our family the year I turned 25. He married my younger sister, Becca, at a ceremony that cost our parents more than they had and less than Derek let on he expected. He was a general contractor, which in our family was practically royalty. He drove a truck with his company name on the side, and he coached a youth soccer league on weekends, and he could talk to anyone at a party in a way that made them feel like the most interesting person in the room. He had that specific kind of charm that only works on people who are not watching his hands while he's talking. My mother, Paula, thought he was a gift from God. She would use those exact words at the dinner table while Derek accepted the last of the roast, and Becca smiled, and I watched my father nod along with the mild, vague expression he had perfected for 40 years of choosing silence. My college friend Nora Webb was at that wedding. She had recently become a licensed real estate attorney, and I had not seen her in almost 2 years. We talked by the bar for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. She had a dry, specific sense of humor and a way of asking follow-up questions that made you feel like what you were saying was worth listening to. I thought, vaguely, that I should call her more. I did not call her for 4 years. The first time Derek said something that did not sit right with me, it was small enough that I almost let it go. It was Thanksgiving of Becca and Derek's second year of marriage. I had made a comment at the table, something about property taxes being disproportionately assessed in our county, and Derek said, without looking up from his plate, "Claire always has to be the expert." He said it lightly, the way you say something you know you can deny was an insult. My mother laughed softly. Becca looked at her fork. My father reached for the salt. I said nothing. I wrote down the date when I got home. I did not know why. I just did. The second incident was at my parents' anniversary party. It was a Saturday afternoon in June, and Derek had acquainted himself the de facto coordinator of the backyard setup, despite no one asking him to. He had reorganized the seating arrangement my mother and I had spent 2 weeks planning, and when I pointed this out, calmly, he said in front of 11 people, "Becca said you'd make this complicated." Becca was standing 6 feet away. She looked at the hedge. My mother said, "Well, it all looks lovely, Derek." I excused myself and stood in the kitchen for 4 minutes looking at the yellow linoleum until I was certain my face had rearranged itself appropriately. The third incident had money in it. Small money, but still. Derek called me in October to say that his crew had a gap between jobs and he could get to the repairs on my porch for cost of materials, as a family favor. I told him the estimate felt high for materials only. He explained patiently, the way you explain things to someone who is being difficult, that lumber prices had gone up and that I should trust him since this was his area. I said I would think about it. He went to my mother and told her I had refused his help. My mother called me that night and told me I was making Derek feel underappreciated. I paid him $1,400. The job took 1 afternoon. When I looked up average material costs for what he had described, they came to $380. The fourth incident I did not learn about until much later. At the time, I only noticed its edges, the way Derek began being copied on emails from my parents about their property, about their finances, about decisions that had always been made quietly between the 4 of us. I asked my mother once directly why Derek needed to be included. She said he was family now and that he had experience with these things. My father nodded. That was the full conversation. What I did not know then was that Derek had, over the previous 18 months, positioned himself as the unofficial manager of my parents' home equity line of credit. They had opened it 6 years earlier to fund a kitchen renovation that had never fully materialized. The line sat mostly unused. The balance on it was $80,000. Derek knew this because my mother had shown him the statement one evening when they were talking about a possible investment in his business. She had meant it as a show of trust. He had meant to remember it. That same year, Nora Webb's firm handled the closing on my parents' house refinance, not because I called her, but because she was the attorney their bank assigned. She reviewed the documents, verified the signatures, filed the paperwork. She had no reason to think anything unusual was happening. Months later, when I finally called her, she would say, quietly, that she had wondered. I did not know any of this on the evening that would be the last ordinary evening for a long time. It was a Sunday in late September. I was at my kitchen table with a bowl of soup I had heated from a can, and the window was open, and there was the specific smell of fall that Ohio does, which is leaves and cold air and the exhaust from someone's leaf blower 2 houses down. I had my yellow legal pad in front of me, and I was reviewing a file for work. My coffee was going cold beside it. I finished the soup, I washed the bowl, I went to bed at 10:15. Derek had been building to something for years, but it came at me in stages, and each stage was calibrated just precisely enough that I kept finding ways to explain it away. The first stage was a comment at a family dinner about 6 years before the Tuesday morning. We were talking about nothing specific, a new development going up on the east side of town, and Derek said, in his easy constructor way, that the real money was in knowing when to move and that some people spend their whole lives looking at other people's numbers instead of building their own. He looked at me when he said it. He smiled when he said it. It landed like a joke. I let it. The second stage was a pattern I noticed over the following 8 months. When family financial decisions came up, my parents' roof, their car, an HVAC issue, Derek was suddenly always in the room, not invited precisely, just present, and his suggestions were always immediately adopted, while mine were received as technical observations that were appreciated but perhaps overcomplicated the situation. I told myself that this was just how families worked when someone practical was available. I wrote down 3 dates.
The third stage had money in it for real. Derek called me one afternoon and asked if I could lend him $3,000 for 2 weeks because he had a cash flow issue between a job payment and payroll. He said Becca didn't know and he would rather keep it quiet. He said he would put it in writing if I wanted, but his tone made it clear that asking for it in writing was an option only a suspicious person would take. I did not lend him the money. I told him I had a cash flow issue of my own. He said, "Sure, no worries," in a voice that meant it was a problem. Becca called me 2 days later, upset about something she couldn't quite name. I connected the 2 things. I wrote down the date. The fourth stage was public. We were at a cookout at Derek and Becca's house, 12 people in the backyard, and someone asked me about my work, and I explained forensic accounting briefly, the way you do when people don't really know what it means. Derek said, loudly enough for the whole table, "Basically, she goes through people's stuff and looks for problems, kind of like being a professional busybody but with a certification." The table laughed. Becca laughed. My mother touched my arm. I smiled. I took 1 chip from the bowl in front of me and ate it. I looked at the middle distance. I did not say anything. Later, in the car, I sat for 4 minutes before starting the engine. The fifth stage was when Derek started coordinating other people. My cousin Ryan, who trusted Derek's business opinions, began relaying messages. "Derek thinks you should let your parents handle their own finances," and "Derek mentioned you've been asking a lot of questions about the equity line." My mother's friend Carol told her that Derek had said he was worried about family tension. He had built, quietly and completely without my participation, a version of me in other people's minds. Difficult, suspicious, too much. The sixth stage was the equity line. I found out about it through a credit notification on my parents' account, which I monitored with their permission as part of a tax preparation arrangement. The line had been drawn down, $80,000 withdrawn over 14 months, in increments that were, and I want to be precise here, exactly the kind of increments that do not trigger standard review flags. I looked at the dates, I looked at the amounts, I looked at the payee information that was available. I recognized the pattern, the way you recognize a song you have not heard in years, immediately and completely, and with a specific feeling in your chest that is not quite anything else. When I brought it up to my mother, she said Derek had borrowed it against a business project, and that he was paying it back, and that it was an arrangement between family, and she would appreciate it if I did not go through their accounts looking for problems. She said this in the kitchen with the yellow linoleum while the faucet dripped the way it always had. She said it in a tone that meant the conversation was finished. The seventh stage was a phone call I was not supposed to hear. I was at my parents' house helping set up for a birthday dinner when Derek came in through the side door, didn't see me in the hallway, and made a call on his cell phone standing in the laundry room. I was standing 6 feet away, around the corner, completely still. He said, to whoever was on the other end, "She's going to figure it out eventually, but by the time she does, it won't matter. Everything's already moved." Then he laughed, a short, private laugh, and said, "She's an accountant. She thinks that means something." I went back to the kitchen. I put a serving spoon in the potato salad. My face did not move. The eighth stage was the confirmation I had needed without knowing I needed it. 2 weeks later, reviewing my parents' documents to prepare their tax filings, I found a signature page from a loan document where the handwriting on my mother's signature line was not my mother's handwriting. I had seen my mother sign her name 10,000 times. This was close. It was not hers. I photographed it with my phone. I said nothing. I noted the date,
March 14th. I had been noting dates for 6 years. I had a folder. I let it go. I didn't argue. I wrote down the date. I made a cup of coffee instead. I went home, I sat at my kitchen table, and I let the realization settle into every part of me the way cold water settles into a cloth. This had never been careless. This had always been planned. I had spent 6 years believing that Derek was careless and opportunistic and that the family's blind spot for him was just ordinary favoritism. That night, I stopped. It was not a dramatic moment. There was no surge of anger, no moment of grief. It was more like the click of a thermostat when the temperature finally reaches the number you set. A mechanical resolution. A thing that had been building reached its level and the system adjusted. What stopped was the low-grade tension I had been carrying in my shoulders for years. The tension of a person who keeps expecting to be believed and keeps being mildly surprised when they are not. It left the way long tension leaves, which is not all at once, but in one clean exhale. I sat at the table for a moment. Then I picked up my phone and I called Nora Webb. Nora answered on the 3rd ring. I told her I had a situation and I needed a professional opinion. She said she had about 20 minutes before a client call. I gave her the outline. The equity line drawdown, the signature I did not believe was valid, the account transfers from the Tuesday morning that had prompted me to look harder at everything else. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Claire, I handled the filing on your parents' refinance 3 years ago. I think you and I need to sit down." We met in her office the following Thursday. The room had a long table and large windows and afternoon light that came in at a flat angle and lay across the documents in a way that made everything look officially important. I had brought my Fireproof box. I had owned the box since I was 27. It was a matte gray metal box with a combination lock and handle, and inside it I kept the documents that mattered: my lease, my tax returns, my parents' original deed, a copy of my parents' will, and a manila folder of dated notes that I had been building for 6 years. Every date I had written down, every amount, every incident with a witness named. I opened the box on Nora's conference table and we went through it together. Nora was precise and quiet in the way that good attorneys are, not dramatic, just thorough. She had a yellow legal pad of her own. She made notes in a handwriting that was smaller and neater than mine. What she confirmed, carefully and in specific language, that the signature on the loan amendment document was, in her professional assessment, inconsistent with my mother's authenticated signatures in the original refinance filing, which she had witnessed herself. That the drawdown pattern on the equity line was consistent with structured withdrawal, a method used deliberately to avoid reporting thresholds. That one of the transfers into Derek's LLC account, cross-referenced with the timing of the Tuesday morning transfers from my personal account, suggested the use of linked account credentials that had been shared or obtained without my knowledge. My account had been accessed through a shared family bill pay platform that I had added myself to 8 months earlier to help manage my parents' utilities during a period when my father was unwell. Derek had been given access to the same platform. I had been the one to set it up. The credentials had been visible in a shared document that Derek could access. He had used them 9 months later when he thought the moment was right. I looked at this fact for a long moment. I looked at the flat afternoon light on the papers. I picked up my water glass and set it down on a different part of the table. Nora walked me through my options without decoration. I could file a civil suit for the $18,950 taken directly from my account, clear, documentable, recoverable. I could file a complaint with the state banking regulator regarding the structured withdrawal pattern on the equity line, which would trigger an audit my parents could not stop without admitting they had authorized it. I could file a criminal fraud complaint with the county regarding the potentially forged signature, which would involve law enforcement and a process I could not control once started, or some combination. I told her I needed 1 week. She said, "You've already waited 6 years. 1 week is fine." I did not call anyone. I did not send a message. I drove home in the slow-moving early evening traffic, and when I got home, I sat at my kitchen table with my legal pad and wrote, very neatly, the names of every person who would be in the room when this was finished. I was not angry anymore. That is the only way I can describe it. The feeling I had was more like the feeling you have after you have verified a column of figures 3 times and they match every time. Settled, certain, done.
Let me stop here for a second, because I think some of you already know exactly where I was sitting that night. You are the one who handles the details. You track the payments and remember the dates, and keep the folder that no one else thinks to keep. You cover the gaps quietly, and you tell yourself that is just what you do. I want you to know that the table is about to turn. Subscribe if you have not, because you have earned the right to be in the room when it does. Now let me finish. 3 weeks after my meeting with Nora, Derek sent a message to the family group chat announcing a family financial planning meeting at my parents' house that Sunday. He had framed it as a gathering to discuss my parents' long-term security and had included a note that all major family stakeholders should attend. He had also, without asking anyone, reached out to my parents' bank to schedule what he described as a review of their accounts for the following Monday. He had no idea that Nora had already submitted a formal complaint to the bank's fraud department 8 days earlier. My cousin Ryan texted me privately. "Did you see Derek's message? What is he doing?" I told Ryan that I would be at the meeting. I said to please not mention to Derek that I had said that. What I felt when I understood what Derek was planning, the public meeting, the bank appointment, the framing of himself as the responsible family organizer, was not anger. It was a cold, clear, particular feeling that I have since tried to describe accurately, and the closest I can come is this. I had also wanted an audience. I had been hoping for exactly this. I just needed a different kind, with different evidence. I printed 12 copies of the document package Nora had prepared. I called Ryan the night before and told him briefly what had happened and what was going to happen. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Should I bring anything?" I said, "Just come." The meeting was in my parents' living room, which has a blue-gray sectional and a coffee table with a glass top and a smell of fabric softener that has lived in those cushions for 20 years. My mother had put out a plate of cookies. There were 8 people. My parents, Becca, Derek, Derek's brother Philip, my cousin Ryan, my aunt Sandra, and me. Derek had set up a small whiteboard on an easel in the corner with bullet points about asset consolidation and family trust structures. He had written my parents' names at the top. He had not written mine. Derek spoke first and at length. He described the meeting as a proactive effort to get everyone on the same page about my parents' long-term security. He used phrases like professional guidance and responsible stewardship. My mother nodded. Becca looked at her hands. My father sat in his recliner with the mildly attentive expression of a man who had agreed to be present without agreeing to follow along. Derek said that some family members had been creating confusion and distrust around financial matters and that this needed to stop. He did not say my name. He did not need to. Everyone in the room looked at me for a moment and then looked away. He spoke for approximately 12 minutes. He was good at it. The room had tilted in his direction by the time he finished. I waited. Then I unfolded my hands from my lap and reached into my bag. I placed 12 folders on the coffee table. I placed them quietly, the way you place things when you are not trying to make a sound. The folders were blue. I had bought them specifically because my parents' house was full of manila folders, and I wanted these to be immediately visually distinct. I said, "I'd like to walk through a few documents." My voice was the same voice I use in client presentations, even, specific, not a performance, just the actual work. I explained the Tuesday morning transfers first. I showed the account records. I showed the platform access logs that Nora's legal request had obtained, which showed Derek's login credentials accessing my bill pay portal at 5:47 a.m., 25 minutes before the transfers began. I said the amount, $18,950. I said the time, 4 transactions in 11 minutes. I did not editorialize. I read the document the way you read a document. Then I showed the equity line analysis, the 14-month withdrawal pattern, the amounts, the structured nature of the increments. I showed the comparison signature analysis that Nora's firm had commissioned, the original notarized signatures from the refinance filing versus the amendment document.
I did not say the word forged. I said, in the professional assessment of a licensed document examiner, these signatures are inconsistent with the authenticated examples. I let everyone in the room read that sentence themselves. My Aunt Sandra put her reading glasses on. She read for a long moment. She looked up at Derek. Derek said this was an attack. He said I always had it in for him and that this was exactly the kind of thing he had been trying to warn the family about. He said I was a paranoid woman with a grudge and that I manufactured a case because I couldn't stand to see him succeed. He said this loudly and with increasing speed, the way a person speaks when they are losing the room and can feel it happening. My mother started to cry quietly. Not for me. From the confusion of it, from the shock of the folders and the figures, and the word inconsistent. Becca said, "Derek, stop talking." That was the sentence, not mine, Becca's, said very quietly, almost without inflection, from a woman who had spent 9 years choosing the hedge and the fork and the floor. The room went absolutely still. Derek looked at her. She did not look at him. She was looking at the signature comparison page. I said, once, clearly, I have filed a complaint with the state banking regulator and a civil suit for the $18,950 taken from my personal account. The fraud department at your bank, I looked at my parents, has already opened an audit. I didn't start this meeting to argue. I started it so that you could hear the facts in your own living room before you heard them somewhere else. I stood up. I did not storm out. I gathered my bag. I left one folder on the coffee table. I walked to the door. Nobody stopped me. That is the part I will remember, not the shouting, the silence after it. In the months that followed, the civil suit settled for $18,950 plus Nora's fees. Derek paid it within 60 days of his legal counsel reviewing the platform access logs. The banking regulator's audit of my parents' equity line resulted in a repayment agreement. Derek was required to restore the $80,000 over 4 years, secured by a lien on his business assets. The signature discrepancy was reviewed by the county prosecutor's office. They did not bring charges. They also did not close the file. Derek's public reputation shifted in the specific, quiet way that reputations shift in mid-sized Ohio cities. Not a scandal, but a change in how people stood near him at events. His youth soccer coaching role ended at the end of that season. He did not volunteer for it the following year. My parents were shaken. My mother stopped setting out cookies for Sunday conversations for a few months. Then she started again. She did not apologize in words. She started calling me on Thursday evenings, which she had not done consistently in years. My father called once and said, "You were right to do it." That was the whole call. It was enough. Becca and Derek separated the following spring. I did not ask her about it. She called me one evening from a parking lot, sitting in her car, and said, "I think I've been choosing wrong things for a long time." I said, "I know, I love you." We talked for 90 minutes. It was the longest we had talked since we were teenagers. Ryan texted me the day after the meeting. "I should have listened to you earlier. I'm sorry." I told him it was fine. It was fine. Derek sent one message 8 months after the settlement. It said, "I hope we can move past this someday." I read it once. I did not respond. I deleted the thread and put my phone face down on the kitchen table and made a cup of coffee. I let it go cold. That was all. What I know now that I did not know clearly enough before is this. The people who count on your precision to hold everything together are sometimes counting on your precision to hold them together too, even when what they are doing is wrong. There is a version of being reliable that serves everyone except you. Knowing the difference between the two is not something anyone teaches you. You have to learn it from the inside of it. I did. 3 things changed in my daily life that I notice still. I no longer answer the family group chat within the first hour. I let it sit. I read it when I am ready. I run in the mornings now, which I had never done before, because someone told me it was good, and I was in a phase of trying things I had previously decided were not for me. And there is a specific moment, maybe twice a week, when I sit down at my kitchen table with my yellow legal pad and my coffee, and the window is open and the street is quiet, and I notice that there is nothing wrong with any of the numbers. All the accounts match. The figures are correct. The folder in the Fireproof box is current. There is nothing I have missed. I let myself sit in that fact for a moment before I begin. It is not a triumphant feeling. It is quieter than that. It is the feeling of a room after it has been cleaned and the light is right and nothing needs to be done yet. So, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have filed the report, named the figures, stood in that room with your folders when everyone expected you to keep quiet one more time? Or would you have let it go again, the way you had been letting it go for years, and told yourself that peace was worth the price? That's my story. My brother-in-law transferred $18,950 out of my account at 6:12 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and by the time he sat down in that living room, he had already forgotten that I had been keeping records before he knew my name. If you are the person in your family who keeps the records, keep them. Keep them in a fireproof box. Keep them with dates. The document you filed away as a formality 6 years ago may be the one that matters most. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment if you've been in a room like that one. Subscribe because the next one is coming soon. I'll see you in the next one.